So he turned around and said, always remember, if you are in a fora like the United Nations, you must believe in the power of ideas to change the world. Yes, it will take time. Yes, it may not happen at the time of your sowing of that seed, but that seed will take root. So you must work, you must keep faith, and that is how you will really get the best out of the United Nations, and you will also give your best to the United Nations.
Welcome to the Anahita Speaker Series presented by Carnegie India, where we celebrate stirring stories of women who lead and inspire. My name is Rahul Bhatia, and I'm a research analyst at Carnegie India. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the second episode of Anahita, where I'll be speaking with Ambassador Lakshmi Puri. Lakshmi Puri is not only a former Indian ambassador, but has enjoyed a distinguished career with the United Nations, serving as the Assistant Secretary General and the Deputy Executive Director of UN Women. Ambassador Puri is also a distinguished fellow at the Indian Association of International Studies and a recipient of the prestigious Eleanor Roosevelt Award for Human Rights. Ambassador Puri, we're honored to have you with us today. If I could begin by asking you about your career as a diplomat, could you tell us about your decision to join the Indian Foreign Service, what your journey was like, and if there were any specific challenges you faced as a female diplomat?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you, Carnegie, for inviting me to be a speaker on this series, along with other very distinguished women. I began my journey in 1974. I was one of the youngest to be inducted. I was 21, just about qualified age-wise to appear for the exam, and then I passed the exam. I wanted to be a doctor and biochemist if I could, but somehow my father convinced me that my forte was in diplomacy, in civil service, and there was a huge U-turn from joining pre-med in the Al Singh College. I went on to do history honors and LSR with a very focused objective of appearing for the civil services exam. And at that time, I was very upset. But now looking back, I really thank my father for having redirected me, route change. And also, I think I've had a dream run in my 43 years career, both with the Indian Foreign Service and with the United Nations. And that's one thing I would like to say to young people today, that, when your parents give you some career advice, take it, at least consider it, because you will thank them for it. They know your strengths. They know where you are, most happy professionally. So as I said, I have had a dream run by and large, and I would not change anything if I were to do it all over again. And I will not deny that the IFS or the MEA have not had their share of patriarchy, of individuals. But it has been one of the most committed equal opportunity employers. I was offered after our training, language training, our ambassador offered me the administration post and said, you will not be suitable for doing media work because it's so male dominated in the Japanese media, both print and television, they will not accept a woman diplomat going out there and meeting them and all that. So I said, okay, just give me 3 months and I will show you, or even less. I said, I'm even willing to go for 1 month, and I will show you that I not only have outreach, but I have definite advantage being a woman who speaks Japanese, who can communicate with them in their own language, which was a very big plus. And, someone who looks a foreigner, but speaks Japanese, I think that will win their heart. And so my ambassador, who was then Ambassador Gonzalez, was one of the most feminist men that I have met in my career. And he, of course, readily agreed. And he said, okay, give it a try. My French colleague had told me his first secretary was not successful. So you try it. And then, lo and behold, I did do the magic, if I may claim. So even if I'm saying it myself. And I got extra access, I thought, because of, my being able to speak in Japanese, being able to reach to them in their own cultural context. And we had some of the biggest successes in media outreach. And I think there were two birds killed with one stone by fielding me there. One was to project a very progressive image of India at that time, and I'm talking about 1975 now. And also then using that lever to also provide a positive visibility, a positive image of other aspects of India's economic and social development. So it was, and also personally for me, I gained confidence in learning how to turn the odds against you into a positive advantage and leverage. Then we come to Pakistan. And as you can imagine, dealing with the Pakistanis at that time as well as now, but at that time it was General Zia's period, was even more challenging because the patriarchy was deeply embedded even in their very sophisticated foreign ministry, as well as in the Zia administration. So there were occasions when, for example, I went as a liaison officer to Pakistan along with a Sikh Jatha as the undersecretary in charge, the desk officer of Pakistan. I went as liaison officer, and President Zia was to meet the liaison, the team, Jathedars. And when the list came of people who were to meet General Zia, they didn't have my name. So Ambassador Natwar Singh, at that time he was the High Commissioner Ambassador, and he was shocked, as I was, outraged by this exclusion. And he insisted, he sent a message back that Mrs. Puri is the liaison officer and she will come with the Jatha to meet the president, and I will bring her. And he took me along. But the president, when he was greeting all the Jatha, the Sikh Jatha, when he came to me, he was completely taken aback. And he looked at me with, he was too polite to express anything, but he looked at me with disapproval and shock. And then, but we all sat down. I started taking notes once they started talking. And within 15 minutes, we had somebody come to me and say, Begum Sahiba, आपको याद कर रही हैं लॉन के उस पार. And then there was a tea table set out, and Begum Zia was made to wait for me there. And I was, I didn't know what to do. I had to accept that invitation and move out. So that was one incident. And subsequently, whenever we went on official visits, it turned out that they would not invite me for the official banquet. So the foreign secretary then, J.M. Dixit, turned around and asked their foreign secretary once whether if Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and at that time the prime minister was Mrs. Gandhi, if she were to come, would you make her eat in the pantry? So this was, they said no, but you see, even our ministers, our cabinet ministers are not invited for these state banquets because this is a stag event. So the definition of stag was something quite different from what is the normal definition. It was so gendered, even in that, so much of discrimination even embedded in that. So these are some of the instances where I had to face prejudice, but I was, I think they saw me as a tough negotiator. I was known as a bit of a hawk, no softy, and they respected me for it. And I think the MEA made sure that my successor was a woman too. Another very interesting phase in my career that I would like to share with you is my role as Joint Secretary, Economic Division and Multilateral Economic Relations. I think in so many ways, we were able to blaze a trail in economic diplomacy. If you look at the history of India's foreign policy, the 90s were a time when we really came out in terms of our economic diplomacy, our Look East policy. And I was right in the middle of that, negotiating with the ASEAN on the partnership, structural dialogue partnership, right from Bali to 98, when in the process we became full dialogue partner. And then also the entire gamut of relationships and plurilateral partnerships like BIMSTEC and other partnerships, also Indian Ocean Rim Association. So all of these multilateral, plurilateral partnerships that we built up at that time, I was very much in the middle of it. And, you asked about challenges. There was this snootiness in the Foreign Service about economic work, because the high ground of foreign policy and diplomacy was about security and strategic diplomacy in that context, rather than the economic side, which they said, well, leave it to the other bureaucrats in the government. There were times when they would hold strategy meetings and they would not call me. So I protested. And one secretary even had the gall to say, but you are not a mainstream division, okay? So then I wrote a strong memo protesting about that and showing how critical the economic component of our bilateral relationship is in building even the edifice of a strategic security relationship. Then there was, of course, another milestone in my life was the ambassadorship to Hungary with concurrent accreditation to Bosnia-Herzegovina. When I went there, the challenge was to build a relationship of substance. And certainly, I always have the economic angle in view. So I said, let's use its comparative advantage. It is right in the heart of Europe, center of Europe, and at that time, whilst I was there, Hungary was admitted into the European Union. Use it as a low-cost, high-skill base for economic and trade relations with the rest of Europe. And therefore, one of my, I think, achievements from at that time was my being able to forge and enable and facilitate the Tata Consultancy Services setting up $100 million software development center for Europe in Hungary. And it is flourishing. I'm very happy to say that it has been flourishing, doing very well. And the second link, which I was very keen, and I think I succeeded a lot in advancing, is to use the soft power of our culture and heritage. And the Hungarians were completely, I mean, they are very much interested in Indology, in Hindi, in our dance, music, art. So bringing that connection also into the Hungarian-Indian relationship and taking it to another level. Those are the highlights of my 28-year-old career in the Foreign Service. So there are 3 stories I want to tell you. The first is, when I started work in the Permanent Mission of India, Geneva, I was going from a bilateral, very hardcore bilateral Pakistan-India relationship, and which is very, tangible, concrete. And I was then going into this rather esoteric, relatively so, and also something that develops very slowly. You don't see results. You can easily feel frustrated or skeptical or cynical. And that was the state I was in the first 2-3 months. And then I had an ambassador who was very committed multilateralist, believed deeply in the United Nations. So I went to him and I said, this is what I'm feeling. And I want to feel committed about what I'm doing. So what am I doing wrong, or what is wrong with the way I'm looking at it? So he turned around and said, always remember, if you're in a fora like the United Nations, you must believe in the power of ideas to change the world. Yes, it will take time. Yes, it may not happen at the time of your sowing of that seed, but that seed will take root. So you must work, you must keep faith, and that is how you will really get the best out of the United Nations, and you will also give your best to the United Nations. The second thing that I want to recall is that K.C. Pant, the late K.C. Pant, he was a wonderful politician, statesman, and he came as the head of delegation to the Human Rights Commission. And, I was very actively negotiating resolutions, piloting resolutions, joining others. So he was looking at all of that. So when he was watching these proceedings and people were making, rights of reply, all of that, the exchanges usually in the Human Rights Commission, people accusing, people defending, and then there are all these resolutions that capture the sense of the House. So he saw that and he said that, I'm watching all this and it all looks so surreal. So I said, yes, maybe, where you come from, it must look rather strange. Then that evening, we went to the house of the Colombian ambassador, who was a former foreign minister. And he said, I told him, he's a good friend. So I told him, our head of delegation is feeling that, that all this happening around us is very surreal. So he said, Mr. Pant, I am myself a former politician. And I feel that this is what is real. These are the real issues that matter. And UN is where we try to guide on real issues that matter to humankind. And surreal is the real. So that's the other point that I would like to make. The third is that, we often blame the UN for not doing this or that, including during the Corona crisis, or Afghanistan, or others. But we must realize, and this is no apology for what UN has done and not done, but one must realize that there are 3 UNs within one, which must work closely together and in harmony and in progression. And these are the Secretariat, Secretary General, and all the heads of organizations, that whole ecosystem of the UN. And then you have the civil society. And most importantly, you have this web of member states and their interactions. So if the Security Council passes a resolution on Afghanistan, and if 2 permanent members abstain, thankfully they only abstained, so the resolution could be passed at this time. But if they abstain, it undermines the value of the value and effectiveness of UN Security Council's authority to keep peace, prevent conflict and war. So this is why it's very important to know, when we are, judging what the UN has done or not done. It's also finished its 75th year last year. That, what were the constraints, but also how to do things differently by all the actors. My particular role there was to develop a global gender compact of norms and standards, high standards on gender equality and women's empowerment, that all member states commit to, and then they translate into regional and national norms and standards and implement them locally. So that was, I think, the highlight of what we were able to achieve and what I was able to contribute to when the historic Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development was adopted. We made sure that there is a dedicated, standalone SDG 5 that is on gender equality, achieving gender equality, and the empowerment of all women and girls, with 9 targets, very comprehensive, integrated, and then to have 11 other SDGs also include gender-sensitive targets, gender-responsive targets. So the whole of Agenda 2030 was strongly gender equality driven. See, the very important part of UN Women's contribution, if you look at 10 years now, UN Women has been around. One of its major contributions has been to, first of all, raise awareness about where we are in gender equality. You need to have data. You need to make women count in that sense. And in that context, I think tremendous work has been done on gender disaggregated data, in gender analysis, promoting that in different sectors, and creating templates for that. But also, very importantly, it is about advocacy and raising awareness through advocacy, provoking outrage about what is not happening or what is happening that is bad, but also outrage about the inaction, and also very specifically about how people are actually trampling on the rights of women. So this is something which is very important, the advocacy part. And so the campaigns play a very important role to create awareness, to mobilize action. And that's why our campaigns, like, we did many campaigns, Planet 50/50, Champions, then Step It Up for Gender Equality. Then we also did Youth Leap for Gender Equality. We did the He for She campaign, of course, you mentioned that. It is really one of the signature campaigns of the UN Women, which was also more broadly accepted by and advanced by other UN entities. And the idea behind that was that we came to the conclusion right at the beginning that unless men and boys are brought into this project, the most important project for humanity in the 21st century, we are not going to get anywhere, because unless their mindsets are changed, unless they stand up for the human rights of women and girls, there is going to be no change. So that is why we focused very much on bringing men and boys into the game into the game of game changing. So that's how the He for She campaign happened, and it was very successful. And I know that every country I visited, and I must have visited something like 70 countries during my stint at UN Women. Every time I would meet the head of state or the minister and pin him for He for She and make commitments on gender equality. And once you are made He for She, you undertake to do certain things, change laws, adopt policies, implement policies. So all of that brings about a cascade of change going forward.
Thank you, ma'am. If I could now move to Afghanistan. Ma'am, you recently penned an op-ed in Hindustan Times about the plight of women in Afghanistan. Could you tell us about the position of women in Afghanistan today and how the international community could help?
Well, you mentioned my article, and one of the first things I say in that article is that there is a UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which was passed in 2000. And during its 2015 review, and more recently its 2020 review, Afghanistan was a case study. And every time it has been affirmed that there is a direct correlation between the human rights of women, their voice, participation, and leadership in peacemaking, in peace and nation building, and in peacekeeping, okay? And the sustainability of peace and the success of peacemaking and peace building. And conversely, where women are not respected, they are not being able to enjoy their rights, their peace will not reign, will always elude. And Afghanistan is a typical case for that. It's a poster board for that. And now we had some hopes in the beginning that Taliban 2 will be different from Taliban 1, but those have been belied. And as we can see, they are going full force to suppress and oppress women, then denying them right to education, including Kabul University, higher education, and then denying them women's sports have been banned, denying them right to work, freedom of movement. So we have actually all the 20-year gains in terms of women's human rights in Afghanistan have been lost. Positive side is that the international community, by adopting the UN Security Council Resolution 2593 on August 30th, has given a very strong signal to the Taliban government that if they want international legitimacy, if they want unfreezing of their funds, if they want economic and political support, then they have to abide by certain norms and rules of the road as much as rules of the game. So that is very positive. However, the backers, the more proximate backers and influential backers of the Taliban regime, like Pakistan and others, are not, in fact, Prime Minister Imran Khan was, even claiming that you cannot impose women's rights from outside. So, they'll do what they have to do. So this kind of attitude, of course, means that in the context of the geo-realpolitik, Afghan women's rights are going to be compromised.
Coming to a more positive note, ma'am, could you tell us about the literary journey you're embarking on right now?
Well, I retired in 2018, and then for 1 year, I completely relaxed. I was, preparing for my younger daughter's wedding. And so I became the total, the housewife for a year. And then when COVID came, and I was completely housebound, I took out an unfinished novel, which I had started 20 years ago when I was in Budapest, and restarted it. And I've just completed it in June. And I'm in the process of now going through the pangs of its birth as a publication. So let us hope that something will materialize in the next few months. Meanwhile, I'm also working on a book of short stories based on life in the UN, which might be of interest not only in India, but around the world. And of course, I write op-eds and opinion, and also papers, occasional papers on international affairs and national affairs. During COVID times, I wrote a lot on national affairs. So, but my novel is something which is a labor of love, because it's inspired by my mother's journey, but also, my parents' journey. And it is situated in the British Raj from 1918 to 1950, around the adoption of the Constitution. So it is as much coming of age story as it is of women's empowerment and breaking boundaries, attaining the attainable and attaining the unattainable or seemingly unattainable. So that's what the book is about, and I hope it will find its destiny.
We definitely look forward to those books. Ambassador Puri, thank you so much for your time and for your insights. I definitely learned a lot from this conversation, and I'm sure our audience will too. Do subscribe to Carnegie India's YouTube channel and follow us on social media platforms for such content. Thank you.
Thank you.